Let me guess. You probably showered today, or at least you stood under warm water long enough to question your life choices. Peppermint shampoo, lavender conditioner, maybe a loofah that's seen better days. 10 minutes later, you were done. Toweled off, checked your hair, maybe even sprayed a little cologne to feel too civilized. Now pause, and imagine this. You wake up in a one-room wooden cottage. There's no faucet, no hot water, no toothpaste. Just a bucket of stale water, a crusty cloth that smells vaguely like goat, and a sibling snoring next to you with a flea doing backflips on their forehead. Welcome to the glamorous life of medieval hygiene. This isn't your spa day. It's bath day, peasant edition, and trust me, you wouldn't survive it without questioning reality. Before we dive into lye soap, lice, and water that looks like soup, like this video if you've ever skipped a shower and called it a mental health day, and hit subscribe for more brutally honest trips through history's weirdest habits. Now let's find out, would you survive a medieval bath day? Here are 12 hygiene habits from the time when soap was a suggestion and dirt was spiritual. The wake-up routine: scratch, spit, repeat. No alarm clock. No sunrise yoga. You wake up because something itches, probably your scalp, possibly your conscience. The straw mattress is damp from last night's sweat. You shared it with your brother. And a chicken. And now, your day begins with the soothing sound of scratching. You stretch, reach for a rag that may or may not have been a diaper last week, and splash a bit of water from a communal wooden bucket. The water is cold, slightly yellow, smells like it's lived a life. To brush your teeth? Well, you don't, not really. You spit outside if you're polite. If you're rich enough, maybe you rinse with a bit of weak ale. Yes, ale. Water wasn't always clean. Mouthwash? More like mouthwish. And no, there's no mirror. Vanity is for the wealthy. You wipe your face with a rag that's done double duty on muddy boots and that's it. Clean? No. Refreshed? Marginally? Alive? Hopefully. The bucket bath. Once in a blue moon. Here's the truth. Medieval peasants didn't bathe the way we imagine. They washed occasionally. Bathing, like actually submerging yourself in water, was a rare ritual. You do it before holy days or weddings, or when your neighbor finally complained about the smell drifting into their soup. The setup? A wooden tub, filled with cold water from the well, or lukewarm if you took the time to boil it over the fire. You undress, sit, shiver. No bubbles, no rose petals. Just splinters and shame. And here's the kicker. You're not alone because water is precious. The whole family uses the same tub, one after the other, oldest to youngest, sometimes reversed, sometimes chaos. By the time it's your turn, the water's more stew than soak. There's hair floating in it, dirt rings, soap scum, and soap itself, homemade, a vicious blend of lye, animal fat, and desperation. It stings your skin, smells like regret. But it's the best you've got. And yes, someone probably peed in the tub last time. No one talks about it, but everyone knows. Hair care, oil, lice, and the itch that never ends. Let's talk hair. Beautiful, flowing, medieval locks, right? Well, if you were lucky, you kept your hair long. But more often than not, your hair was a breeding ground for lice. It wasn't about if you had lice. It was about how many. Combs? There were special lice combs with fine teeth. They were passed around, shared within villages, like gossip and the flu. Washing your hair wasn't weekly. It wasn't even monthly. It was whenever someone pointed at you and said, "You smell like a cursed goat." Herbal rinses were used. Vinegar, nettle, rosemary if you had access. More often, people oiled their hair with animal fat. Why? To drown the lice. Literally smother them. And when it got too much, shave it off. Bald was better than infested, especially for kids who were easy targets for lice colonies the size of a commune. But don't worry, the lice always came back, like exes or tax collectors. Clothes washing, cold rivers, cracked hands, and frozen shirts. In medieval times, you didn't have a wardrobe. You had an outfit too if you were doing well and laundry wasn't routine. It was a full-on quest. First find a river. Then haul all your clothes, meaning your shirt, your undertunic, maybe some hose, and start scrubbing with ash, sand, or homemade soap until your hands felt like rawhide. You beat clothes against stones. You prayed they wouldn't tear. And you hoped it wouldn't rain because drying involved bushes, hedges, or fence posts. Winter. If you tried to wash clothes in winter, they froze while wet, so you just didn't wash. You wore them crusty, musty, and frosty, layered stink like armor. It was accepted. If everyone smells bad, no one smells bad, right? Toilets, nature is your loo. Let's cut to the chase. There were no bathrooms, not for peasants, not outside castles. You had two choices. Dig a pit. Go in the fields. If you were lucky, your village had a cesspit, a hole in the ground maybe covered by wood planks. If you were poor, you squatted behind a bush and hoped no one walked by. Urban folks had chamber pots, and they got dumped right into the street, usually with a warning yell, "Guardiloo," which means duck now or wear someone's dinner twice. Wiping. That's where things get creative. Straw, moss, cloth scraps, your hand. And yes, they always used the left hand, which is why the right hand became the one for greetings, eating, and blessings. Toilet paper? You mean that thing you scroll through on your phone while avoiding life? Medieval peasants would have thought it was sorcery. Teeth and mouth, twigs, wine, and a silent scream. Now, your teeth. Peasants didn't brush. They chewed, chewing. Sticks, usually from softwood trees, worked as natural toothbrushes, rubbed along the gums, sometimes dipped in salt or herbs. For mouthwash, you might swish with wine or vinegar, or not at all. Breath mints. Try a sprig of mint if your garden had any. Otherwise, just hope no one gets too close. The silver lining. Medieval peasants had less sugar in their diets than we do today, so fewer cavities. But when toothaches struck, extraction was the cure. No dentist, no numbing gel, just a big guy with strong arms and something metal. They'd tie a string. Hold you down, yank. If that didn't work, well, that was the end of dinner for a while. And yes, screaming was involved. Lots of it. The armpit ritual, scent of the century. Let's get intimate. Deodorant doesn't exist. Perfume if you're a noble? Maybe. For the average peasant, the solution to body odor was ignoring it, or masking it with herbs. They'd stuff lavender, or rosemary under their clothing. Some tied little pouches of flowers around their neck. It helped. Kind of. But most just accepted the musk. Because guess what everyone smelled? You didn't notice your friend's stench when you were marinating in your own. And armpit hair, left alone. No razors, no waxing, just nature doing her thing. Sweat. Plus layers of wool. Let's just say your pits were a chemical weapon by mid-afternoon. The real question wasn't if you stank. It was how long you could go before someone moved away from you during prayer. Foot care, cracks, blisters, and bare survival feet were tools, not pampered, not polished, just battered. Most peasants didn't own shoes. If they did, they were basic leather, thin, flat, and soaked through in minutes. Walking barefoot was normal. Stones, thorns, mud, manure, you felt it all. Your soles got calloused like old bark, cracked, bleeding, filthy. Washing them? Rare. You might splash them in a stream. But mostly you just ignored the pain, or wrapped them in rags if the blisters burst. Fungal infections? Oh, they happened. But medieval folks didn't know what fungi were. Just that your foot itched, peeled, and smelled like death. Foot hygiene was survival, not beauty. If you had all 10 toes by age 40, you were doing great. Women's hygiene, secret struggles. Here's where things get even tougher. Medieval women didn't get hygiene. Breaks? Just more expectations, less help, and way more mess. Periods, no pads, no tampons. Just rags, reused, washed when possible, and stuffed in clothing. Some went without. Bled into their underlayers. Yeast infections, UTIs, and worse, common. Doctors didn't understand them. Most women suffered silently, thinking it was punishment from God. Pregnancy hygiene? Good luck. Midwives helped, but infection was constant. No gloves, no sterilization, just hands, herbs, and prayer. And hair removal, sometimes done with rough tweezers or burnt cloth. Painful, risky. There was no feminine hygiene. There was just surviving silently and hiding stains before church. Public baths, a splash of hopes and disease. In towns and cities there were public bathhouses. Sounds promising, right? They were better than nothing, but still risky. Men and women sometimes bathed together, naked, communal, often rowdy. Soap was shared. So were diseases. Lice loved these places. So did skin infections. Still, people paid to feel human again. Bathhouses were also social spaces. You heard gossip, met friends, sometimes too friendly. Some bathhouses doubled as brothels. Cleanliness and sin danced in the same hot water. No wonder religious leaders were suspicious. Eventually, many public baths were shut down, not because of hygiene, but morality. Because nothing says clean like shame and judgment. Hand-washing, before germs were a thing. Today, we wash hands after everything. In the medieval world? Not so much. People didn't know germs existed, so hand-washing wasn't about health, it was about ritual or appearances. You might wash before a meal, especially if guests were present, but no soap, just a bowl of water and maybe a cloth. From our tea. Using the toilet. Most didn't wash. You wiped, you moved on, and that's why handshakes were kind of terrifying. The wealthy sometimes scented their water with herbs. The poor hoped the cold water scraped off the visible grime. And don't forget, they ate with their fingers. So if you think medieval feasts were glorious, imagine them knowing where those hands had been. Skin and smell, dirt as a virtue. Finally, let's talk skin. Modern folks chase glow-ups. Back then, pale skin meant wealth. Dirt meant labor. Peasants had dirt under their nails, embedded in their knuckles, stained into their pores. But some believed staying too clean made you sick. Bathing was risky, opened your body to the elements. So some avoided it on purpose. There was also a belief that good smells came from the soul, bad smells, just part of life, or a test of your faith. They used pomanders, little scented balls, to carry near their faces, not to clean themselves. To survive, they covered rot, literally, used around death and disease. Clean skin was less important than covered stench. So, would you survive a medieval bath day? Be honest. Could you go a month without shampoo? Share bathwater with 4 siblings, and a chicken, wipe with moss, chew a twig instead of brushing? Medieval hygiene wasn't for the faint-hearted. It was gritty, raw, and often disgusting. But it worked well enough for people to live, work, love, and raise generations through sweat, through grime, through lice and lie. It reminds us cleanliness is a privilege. So next time you skip a shower, just whisper, "At least I'm not using goat fat soap in peed-in water." Like this video if you made it through without gagging. And subscribe if you want more unfiltered truth from the darker corners of history, because the past wasn't polished. It was pungent and strangely human.